Good morning. Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So the other day I saw a couple of videos from Fox News. Tucker Carlson was talking about affirmative action and he was talking about racism. And I want to take some time right now to respond to some of the things that he said on his program. And I know that it's early and most people aren't tuning in, so hopefully you all will be able to catch this later on. But I just wanted to share my thoughts and just go live instead of pre-recording a video and putting it up. So I'm going to share my screen with you all. And also I'm going to do some other videos this morning. I'm going to do some other live streams. There's some things that I want to talk about. And I'll just let you know what I want to do live streams on. The first thing will be about this African-American woman who either married or is dating a former neo-Nazi. I have to talk about that. And also I want to talk about the situation here in Baltimore with the school system, like how some of the schools don't have adequate heating in their buildings. And here in Baltimore, for the past couple of weeks, the temperature has been below freezing. So I have to talk about that and just the issues of race and, racism and, the problem where you have African Americans in positions of leadership, but you still have these kinds of problems in our community. I have to discuss that. That's something that's very important. So you all can look out for those live hangouts this morning. Hopefully I'll be able to crank them all out this morning real quickly. But I had to talk about this Tucker Carlson issue. And I'm going to share my screen with you all so that you could see what I'm referring to. Just bear with me a second. Okay, so Tucker Carlson did some segments on Fox News. The first segment, he spent time lashing out at white liberals and essentially blaming them for white nationalism. And I'm going to go into more detail about that. And then there was another segment that I saw about affirmative action, where he was interviewing an African-American attorney, the attorney that represented Bill Cosby at one time, and they were talking about the issue of affirmative action. So I plan to talk about that as well in this video. So Tucker Carlson did a segment where he was talking about how on the left, people are encouraged to attack people based on the color of their skin. In particular, people are encouraged to attack white people. This man was basically painting white people as the victims. He was talking about how there are publications that attack an entire race of people for having certain characteristics or based on their color, their skin, and all that kind of stuff. And he cited The Root and BuzzFeed as examples. And with respect to The Root, he cited a couple of articles. He cited this article right here entitled "White People Need to Be Better People." He also cited this article right here, white people, well, it says we need a reset button or something for white people. That's another article he cited. And then he cited this article, "The Most Useless Types of White People Ranked." So those were some of the articles that he cited from The Root as examples of racism against white people. And then he also cited an article on BuzzFeed entitled 37 Things White People Need to Stop Ruining in 2018. And he basically used these as examples to say that you have liberals attacking white people and presenting, negative images of white people and basically promoting racism. And he went on to talk about how this promotes white nationalism, because when people see these types of articles and stuff like that, it makes them angry. It makes them identify more with race and stuff like that. and it makes them more identify with these white supremacist type of groups. And basically, this guy is trying to blame the left for encouraging people to join these white supremacist groups. That's what it is, when you boil the things that he said down to their essence. He said that, when people see these types of articles, why wouldn't they begin to embrace a racial identity when everybody else does? When you have Black people embracing a racial identity and speaking in these racial terms. And then he also said, how much of it are you going to take before you explode at the unfairness of it all? The unfairness of seeing these types of articles. I think that this is absurd. I think that it's ridiculous. And I think that this is a shame that you have somebody like this in a position where they are basically race baited. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more detail a little bit later on in this live stream. But first of all, I want to debunk his main point about these articles suggesting that they are racist articles when they are not racist articles. I'll start off with this article right here. This article is not an attack on all white people. It is raising legitimate questions. It's an article written by Damon Young. And in this article, he talks about the election in Alabama. They had a special election for the U.S. Senate, and you had Roy Moore running against Doug Jones, the Democrat, against a Republican. And the Republican, Roy Moore, had been entangled in controversy because this man had been accused of being basically a serial pedophile, sexually harassing and abusing underage girls. That's what this man was accused of. This man has also made racist statements that are cited in this article. And despite all of that, despite all the controversy that this man faced, 72% of white men voted for this guy. They voted for a pedophile. They voted for a racist. 63% of white people in Alabama voted for this guy. They voted for a pedophile. They voted for a racist. And that's a damn shame, man. And that's the whole point of this article, is to say that it is ridiculous that you would have this high percentage of white people vote for a pedophile. And his point is that those types of people need to be better people. It says something about someone's character when they are willing to vote for a damn pedophile. It says something about someone's character when they are willing to vote for a racist. That man, Roy Moore, was asked about when America was great. And this man said that America was great during the time of slavery. You had all these white people vote for this racist, this damn pedophile. So, of course, this article is on point by asking, by basically saying that those types of white people that voted for that guy need to be better people. It's a shame that they would vote for a racist. So this is not some racist article attacking white people. It is an article attacking those people that were so ignorant that they would vote for a damn pedophile and a racist. That's what that article is about. Also, they cited this article, the most useless types of white people ranked. And basically, this article is about people who are culturally insensitive, people who don't really know how to address race issues properly and all that kind of stuff. That's what the article is about in a nutshell. And you all can read the article for yourself. There's a link in the description box for those of you who would like to read it. It just cites these examples of phony white liberals, for instance. It cites examples of people who are clueless when it comes to race issues and all that kind of stuff. Exaggerated examples like, white people are so, where you have a white person saying white people are so terrible, I hate us. Those kinds of examples. Like that's, an example of extreme views that some white people may try to espouse to present it as if they are so liberal and so down with the cause and all that kind of stuff. So the article goes on and on. And also, it's important to note that a lot of this guy, Damon Young's writing is satire, it's exaggeration, it's comedy and all that kind of stuff. It's just funny how these people are so into satire and sarcasm and all that kind of stuff when they're the ones telling the jokes. But when Black people tell their own stories from their own perspective, all of a sudden they're racist. All of a sudden we're to blame for white nationalism and white supremacy. And that's absurd. So, I'm not going to go through that entire article. I encourage you all to just check these articles out for yourself. Also, another article that he cited was this article, "We need a reset button or something for white people," basically suggesting that this is racist. And this article is about a lot of different things. It points out, problems with NFL owners. It talked about like the White House spinning stories in a ridiculous kind of way. It talked about a variety of things like the Harvey Weinsteins and, the other people who have been accused of sexual abuse and stuff like that. So it makes a larger point. But this guy wants to highlight this article as if it's some example of Black people being racist towards white people, as if it's an example of something that would justify people identifying with the white nationalists and white racist movements, which is absurd. And then you have this article that he cited from BuzzFeed. And basically this article is just condemning cultural appropriation. That's what it's about. For example, that whole Pepsi ad where you had someone, one of the Jenner girls, Kendall Jenner, basically appropriating the Black Lives Matter movement to sell some products, something that should be condemned. And then you have this whole thing where you have these white guys pretending to be like Korean, one of these Korean singing groups. And they cite all these examples like this one where you had this white woman using all this African-American slang and ebonics and stuff like that, trying to present herself like she's down with Black people and this and that. And then you have this example where you have women basically having on blackface, man, using blackface type of makeup. This is, it's tied into those stereotypes of Black people. It's tied into the minstrel shows and all that kind of stuff. That's what this article is about. It's about condemning cultural appropriation and just negative activities like this, for instance, where you have these people putting traps in trees in order to prevent birds from landing in the trees. Another example is this, they cite like how the majority of white people voted for Donald Trump. And that's something that and they cite this as something that's being ruined, America. Yes, it is. Like when you had this man in the White House, Donald Trump, a man who has sympathized with white supremacists, a man who's apologized for those people, made excuses for those people, talked about how some of them were very good people and all that kind of stuff. You have a man that's trying to use the Justice Department to undermine affirmative action. You have a man that set up a sham voter rights commission to suppress Black and Latino voters. You have a man that condones racial profiling, a man who is trying to cut back benefits like food stamps and Section 8, a man who doesn't deserve to be in the White House, a man who's unfit for service, a man who knows nothing about politics, a man who's a disgrace to the nation, a man who is provoking conflict with North Korea, a man who's unfit. So, this is an apt example. I mean, this point is well made. The point that many white people voted for this guy. He wouldn't be president if he didn't have a support from a majority of white people. It says that 58% of white people voted for Donald Trump. 50, and that's absurd, man. You know, it cites the Oscars. You know, we know about the discrimination that has gone on with the Oscars. You've had years where no Black actors were nominated for any of the major awards. And it cites the Grammys, where you have a lot of these white artists being receiving awards over Black artists that are well qualified to receive the awards, worthy of receiving awards. And it goes on, citing examples of cultural appropriation, etc. So those things are not examples of racism. You know, it's ridiculous that this guy would try to say that those things are examples of racism. And I'm going to get to your comments in a second. It's ridiculous, man. I mean, when you think about what racism is, first of all, you have to understand that Black people cannot even really be racist. You know, of course, you can have Black people that are bigoted. You can have Black people that are narrow-minded. You know, Black people that are prejudiced. But you can't have Black people that are racist. Black people are not in a position to be racist. Racist is a criminal justice system that disproportionately sentences and, you know, incarcerates Black people. That's racism. Racism is a failing school system that doesn't educate Black people. That provides Black people with inferior education. Racism is Black kids here in Baltimore not being able to go to school because their buildings don't have adequate heating. That's what racism looks like. Racism is police officers killing Black men who are unarmed, and those police officers not even being charged for a crime. And in the rare cases when they are charged with a crime, they walk. They get exonerated. They are found not guilty. That's what racism looks like. Racism looks like Black people being discriminated against in employment, Black people not being able to get a job, you know, having less chances of getting a job than someone with an equal education that they have, you know, being screened out of job positions just because of their names, because they have African or, you know, African American sounding names. They're denied job opportunities. That's what racism looks like. Racism looks like Black people not having nearly as much wealth as white people. As I've cited before, there's an article in the Nation magazine that talked about how it would take Black people over 200 years to amass an equal level of wealth that white people have. That's what racism looks like. Racism looks like Black people with the same level of education not having the same level of wealth as white people, not having the same job opportunities as white people. Racism is not some silly, goofy satire article raising points about issues of race. That's not what racism looks like. This man is ridiculous, and I think that this is an example of white tears, a prime example of it. You know, these people whining and crying about things that are not worthy of crying and whining about. You know, things that are insignificant in the big scheme of things. And this is a prime example of race baiting. This is what race baiting looks like. This man is trying to feed the base of the Fox News audience what they want. You know, he's trying to feed them a diet of racism, trying to ignite anger in these people, to give them something to rage about. You know, he talked about how, you know, you have these poor white people who have all these particular issues, and when they see articles like these, it's going to make them more racist or make them identify with their race and identify with these white supremacist groups. Those articles are not what's harming, you know, poor white people or working class white people and stuff like that. That's not the issue that they need to be worried about. They need to be worried about an economy that is pushing them out of the job market. They need to be worried about a capitalist system that allows these corporations to exploit all working people and poor people. That's what they need to be worried about. Instead, you have Fox News wanting to get these people riled up and having them hate Black people, having them operate in a way that's contrary to their interests as a class. So that's what Fox specializes in. They pretend to be condemning racism while, in fact, what they're doing is promoting racism. And this guy presents a feeble attempt to try to explain or justify these white supremacist groups. Even though he tries to condemn white supremacy, the fact of the matter is he's making excuses for it. The fact of the matter is he's trying to blame the liberals for white supremacy. White supremacist groups were around long before you had The Root. White supremacist groups were around long before you had BuzzFeed. White supremacist groups did not need an article from a Black blog in order to increase their ranks. They didn't need that because they had already been increasing their ranks. And all this is a situation where they are blaming the victim, blaming Black people for speaking out against racism. If you read those articles, you will find that for the most part, they are speaking out against racism in those articles, challenging racism. And because Black people speak out against racism, they want to blame us for racism. That's ridiculous. That's absurd. And it's a prime example of how these people operate, how these hate mongers operate, these people like Tucker Carlson. I mean, it's a shame that advertisers promote their products on a Fox News channel that's designed to perpetuate racism. It's a shame. And then also, he talked about this issue of affirmative action. He had this sister on there, the sister that represented Bill Cosby at one time. I can't remember her name. Once I go back, I'll post her name in the description box. But basically, they had a discussion about affirmative action. And you had this guy, Tucker Carlson, saying that affirmative action was unfair to white people. He talked about how white people are being judged because of characteristics that they can't control, like their skin color or their genes. And he basically suggested that affirmative action is a preference for Black people or other non-white people. And I have to talk about this, man, because first of all, affirmative action doesn't even go far enough. Affirmative action is not about, unfortunately, it's not designed to remedy past discrimination. It's more so focused on creating diversity. If you read a lot of the court decisions, they talk about how promoting diversity is a compelling state interest or a compelling interest or whatever that would justify affirmative action. Dealing with past discrimination, according to these cases, is not. So affirmative action is very watered down. It is all about diversity, and you have all kinds of people that benefit from affirmative action. You have white women that benefit from affirmative action. You have poor people that benefit from affirmative action, regardless of their race. So they consider a whole wide range of different factors when it comes to affirmative action. And race is just one of many factors. It's a factor of a factor considered in school admissions and all that kind of stuff. And, white people are not being denied opportunities to get higher education for the most part. You have white people who are admitted to universities under affirmative action because they meet, they may have another diversity characteristic. For instance, they may live in a rural area, which would be a basis for affirmative action, or they may be from a poor family and stuff like that. So there are all kinds of categories. So all different types of people are able to benefit from affirmative action. So it is not a racial preference. And when you look at the big scheme of things, when you look at these white universities, they are predominantly white. It's a small percentage of Black people at these universities to begin with. And it is not discrimination. Discrimination is what happened during the Jim Crow era, when Black people were denied admission to universities, regardless of their qualifications. You know, you had Black people that were intelligent with great grades, excellent students. You know, like a Thurgood Marshall, a man who would go on to become a U.S. Supreme Court justice. That brother was denied an opportunity to go to the University of Maryland's law school because of his race. And you have countless examples of that, where Black people had the qualifications to go to these schools, but because of their skin color, they were deliberately denied access to higher education. For years, you had Black people forced to go to forced to go to dilapidated schools. They could not go to a white school. They could not go to an integrated school or a school with a lot of facilities and all that kind of stuff. We were denied educational opportunities. So I think that this whole suggestion that affirmative action is some kind of preference is absurd. It is not a preference for minorities. I mean, when you look at the situation in terms of the admission rates, in terms of how many white people are on these campuses compared to these minorities, it's only a small number of people that are actually able to go to these universities and stuff. So I think that it's absurd. And it's another example of these people trying to paint the victim as the perpetrator, trying to blame the victim. And, this is typical Fox News stuff, man. So I just had to share my views on this issue. I think it is a disgrace that you have this man, Tucker Carlson, promoting this nonsense. And then also you had this guy, one of his guests, this white man, talking about how Black people obsess over race. He talked about how if you want to see racism, you will. And I've cited examples of actual racism that it continues to exist in this society. Racism is not a figment of our imagination. It is something that is very real, that impacts our lives on a daily basis. And this particular white guest went on to talk about like how he had some conversation with a Black upper middle class woman, and she was complaining about racism, and he wondered what would happen if she lived one day as a white woman and realized that she was still harassed just as much as she was as a Black woman. Basically saying that this Black woman needs to walk in a white woman's shoes, which is silly. If these people lived our experience, they would understand what we were talking about. They would understand what it means to be racially profiled when you go into a store to buy something. I was here reading the article. I came across some article where this woman, I think she went to a Louis Vuitton shop and she spent like $6,000 or something like that. And they racially profiled her. They accused her of fraud, if I'm not mistaken. So you have examples of like that all the time. I mean, you have examples in the hood. You go into a store or whatever, and these people are looking at you, following you, thinking you're up to no good, thinking you're going to steal something. You've had the experience just as a Black man. You get on a elevator, and there have been women that clutch their purses, afraid that you're going to steal from them. We have the experience when we encounter these police who stop Black men and harass Black men, assuming that we are criminals. We are being criminalized just because of the color of our skin. Just like the example of Trayvon Martin, a young brother walking home from the store. And all of a sudden, this guy sees him and he says that thinks he's up to no good. He must be a criminal or something. Automatically assumes that, and that brother ends up dead. These people are just outrageous. I mean, they are the ones that need to walk a mile in our shoes. The last thing this man needs to be doing is talking about how some Black woman needs to walk in the shoes of a privileged white woman. That's absurd. It's ridiculous. So yeah, I just had to get this off my chest. I'm gonna go through your comments before I close out. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Even though it's super early in the morning. Um, Now I see Darian Marion said that only white women benefit from affirmative action. White women do benefit from affirmative action, but it's ridiculous to suggest that only white women benefit from affirmative action. When you look at the numbers of African American men and women who actually benefit from affirmative action, get into colleges, universities, and graduate schools because of affirmative action, it's silly. And then when I look at my own life, I benefited from affirmative action. You know, I was able to go to law school because of affirmative action. So I think that that's just a false statement that people are constantly putting out here, that affirmative action only benefits white women. Yes, white women benefit, but so do black men and black women and other so-called minorities. Shout out to Shaq B. I'm just reading through your comments. And, you know, before I go any further, I just want to highlight this point. Like, you know, as I said, you know, I think that there is a such thing as black bigotry and prejudice. And, you know, I don't support that. You know, I don't support people being bigoted and prejudiced, you know. But I think that that's different from racism. You know, racism is oppression. Racism is a system. You know, it's having power to oppress people. And black people don't have that kind of power. But you do have black people who are bigoted and you know, prejudiced. But also, you know, when I look at that, even when I look at that situation, that is the hate that hate produced. You know, even though I don't condone it, I always look at it in that light as being a product of white supremacy and racism. Now, Darian said, you know, that he read some BuzzFeed article where they listed oppressed people in America, and the one group that they missed was the heterosexual black man. And this person said BuzzFeed is trash. And I read BuzzFeed from time to time. You know, I'm not like a follower of it, so I can't, you know, say it's not trash. Like the articles that I have read are not trash. You know, I don't know what this person's talking about. And I'm sure that on that list, they probably included um, black people as one of the most oppressed groups in America, which would include heterosexual black men. So, I mean, I just think that that statement is silly, you know. And I may just, well, I'm not going to Google. I'm not going to Google that article. That's going to get me sidetracked. I don't want to go off on a tangent. Um, and Elaine Lloyd said that pointing out that people are not perfect is not racist. Exactly. It's not racist at all. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Shaq B, about like how these people are crying over some articles, you know, making that into some big deal when there are other more discriminatory actions that are taken against black people, which I cited earlier in the stream. You know, it's an example of white tears, man. That's what it is. Another example of these people crying over nothing. You know, you would think that these articles were on some on some racist stuff, like, you know, calling white people cocker devils or evil albinoids and all that kind of stuff. But no, it's not doing that. I mean, these articles are not racist articles. They're not bigoted articles at all. Yeah, that's a good point. Elaine Lloyd, like, we could give them, if we had a trade, we could say, okay, well, we would rather have people write those kind of articles about us than to actually live, and endure the type of racism that we experience on a daily basis. And a lot of times people have this idea that racism is just like individual examples of racism where somebody's calling you an N-word or somebody's uh, personally insulting you or personally discriminating against you. The most pervasive form of racism is institutionalized racism, racism that is systemic. And that's the kind of racism that we experience, like the racism in terms of the school system, in terms of the education system, the school system, the prison system, the criminal justice system, policing issues, and all kinds of things, the economic system. And this guy, Darian Marion, or whatever his name is asked if this guy is a confirmed pedophile. You have several people accusing him of being a pedophile. Several people who have accused him of this. A whole bunch of women came forward and have accused him of sexually abusing them or trying to engage in sexual relationships with them when they were underage. The fact that he is accused should have some kind of merit. I mean, that should be enough to make people question whether or not they should vote for this guy. I mean, I think this person is trolling me because these comments are just outright silly and ridiculous. I mean, imagine a black man accused of something like that, running for office. These people would have a field day condemning him. But you had this person in here saying, he's just accused. All these dozens of people came out and, said he sexually abused them when they were children. But yeah, it's just an allegation and, people should go ahead and vote for this guy. That's ridiculous. And the fact that you had a Republican Party support this man, despite those allegations, despite the racist statements that he made, that tells you a lot about the Republican Party. It tells you a lot about Donald Trump. And Shaq B, I mean, it's right. I mean, they're taught to focus on worthless fights rather than the white elites robbing their pockets in Wall Street. Exactly. They're taught that, some article in the Root or on BuzzFeed is so important. That's what they need to be worried about. That's what they need to be aggravated about, instead of being aggravated about the corporations who are moving the jobs overseas. Instead of being aggravated about the corporations that are reaping these huge profits while they're still not paying workers a living wage. They got them worried about some article in the Grio instead of being worried about having adequate health care, clothing and shelter and all those types of things. Just bear with me, man. A second, Joe. Now I see that Marion said, he said, man, I went to a HBCU. We need to funnel those dollars to Black colleges. Those educational funds can help to grow Black institutions. Now, I don't have a problem with that. I went to a historically Black college as well. For undergrad, I went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. And for law school, I went to a predominantly white law school. So I've had both experiences. And I do encourage Black people to go to historically Black colleges and universities. I think we should support those institutions. Those people who have become successful, these Black millionaires and Black people who are even billionaires should donate to historically Black colleges and universities. And I think that more of our people should consider going to Black universities. But unfortunately, the Black colleges and universities cannot accommodate all Black students. And I think that Black people should have the option to decide which universities they want to attend. Even though I think that, people should support HBCUs, I definitely think that people should do that. And we should, channel money into those universities. But I don't have any problem with someone deciding to go to another type of school. And I think that everybody should have the option to pursue their dreams. Now, you said that, I see Marion said that I should interview George Middleton, an author. What book has he written? You can let me know in the live chat. And if you have his contact info, depending on what he's written and what his positions are, I may consider that. I may consider interviewing him. Shaq B says that he was in. No, he says that it was at Saks Fifth Avenue. In terms of that story I was telling, I thought she was buying Louis Vuitton or something. But it says that she was at Saks Fifth Avenue, the story about racial profiling, and she spent $6,700. They assumed that she couldn't earn it because she was Black. And somebody was rude to her, a race soldier, in his words, was rude to her at the store. So I may look up more information about that and do a separate video on that subject. It was something that I saw in passing. So this person, Marion says, so you were able to go to law school just because you were Black? No, not just because I was Black. Again, affirmative action is not just about race. They consider a wide range of factors. I didn't go to law school, getting into law school just because I was Black. I had good grades in undergrad. I studied hard. I scored a certain percentage on the LSAT or whatever. I had certain qualifications, based on my background, extracurricular activities, and my interests and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't get into law school just because I was Black. But race was one of several factors considered by the school when they admitted me into a law school. Shout out to Water Sniper. Good morning to you. Good morning to Herb Saint. Yeah, I agree. Tucker is a true troll. I mean, that's what he's doing. He's trolling the Black community with his commentary. And it's just ridiculous, man. It's ridiculous that he would try to blame these whites, basically blame Black liberals for the increased numbers in these white supremacist groups. And that reminds me of another point, like the mere election of Barack Obama to be president of the United States, that inspired many people to join those hate groups. Their ranks began to swell after the election of a Black man. They felt threatened to see Black people elect a president, to see a Black man in that powerful position. They're not fearful of some article that somebody wrote. That's not what's inspiring these people. They were inspired long before that. They're inspired by hatred. Those people fear Black power. That's what they fear. And we'll know, like around Reconstruction time, that's when, the Klan began to be powerful. It began to be a force of terror used to undermine Black empowerment. They didn't need some article from The Root in order to get members, or from BuzzFeed or something like that. And I think that suggestion is silly and just ridiculous. Um, And again, this guy is saying, I think that it's absurd to say that the only reason you were able to go to law school is because you were a black man. That's not what I never even said that. I said affirmative action made it possible for me to go to law school. Malcolm Goodman said, I just wanted to say I enjoy your work. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then this guy, Marion, said several people accused Bill Cosby of being a rapist. Um, and he's trying to compare that to the Roy Moore situation. Bill Cosby wasn't running for public office. That's number one. He wasn't running to be in a position in Congress where he could make laws affecting people's lives. So that comparison is off. He's an entertainer, and this guy was Roy Moore is somebody that's trying to be a politician, somebody that's trying to hold a position of power. And you want to tell me, are you saying that those allegations are relevant when you're considering and voting for somebody? You know, when you consider voting for somebody, you consider their character, you consider their history and, you know, things that have been said about them. You consider those kind of things. And shout out to Apple Tree. Apple Tree mentioned that Roy Moore is well known in town as going with underage girls. Thanks for your comment. Apple Tree said that I'm about the only channel that makes sense with some of my topics. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your comments, Elaine Lloyd. You said that he does good work. Appreciate it. V Dub said that it was the Louis Vuitton department at Saks. Okay, so I knew that Louis Vuitton was in there somewhere, man. I knew I wasn't just making that up. All right, so I'm gonna go back and check out that article, and I may do a separate video about that. And Apple Tree said that some guys have taken, I guess some people believe that black women are boycotting the Panther movie and they're having a feast with it. Yeah, I touched on that in one of my prior live streams, so y'all could check that out if you missed it. Yeah, so with that, I'll say peace and blessings to each and every one of you. Thanks for watching this live stream. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting my channel. You know, continue to like my videos, share my videos. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. And I see that V-Dub asked, did I hear about the police beating in Texas? I'm gonna have to look that up. And he said that you know, cops beat up a young girl on NYE. I'm gonna have to look that up as well. And Marion said he appreciates me reading his comments. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind if people disagree with me, just as long as people don't troll and they, you know, as long as they're respectful and they don't insult people. I don't mind debating people or you know, dealing with alternative viewpoints and all that kind of stuff. In fact, I embrace that. Like I welcome debate and discussion. So with that, I'll say peace and blessings to each and every one of you. I'm going to start another live stream in a few minutes, so I hope that you all can tune in for that. Peace and blessings. Have a great day.